Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the LaRouge Rugby Podcast. My name is Dan Murphy, and with me always is Derek Brissett and Stu Hardy. Gentlemen, we have yet another fantastic guest to join our show, Mr. Luke Campbell from the wonderful BC, and he is now from Old Glory DC. Luke, starting all things off, congrats on the new contract. We're excited to see you back in MLR. Are you excited for your first MLR training camp?
Yeah, thanks guys for having me. Really excited to be honest. I think regardless if it's your first one or not, this one's pretty special just given the circumstances everyone's been in and the long layoff. So everyone's kind of itching to get ready to get into it.
Do you feel like guys, whether, Old Glory teammates or Canada or any other rugby players that you kind of know are a little bit more hyped to start this season just because of, I guess, the craziness that basically if you're in kind of North America, nobody's really played a rugby game since I guess maybe with the exception of that high performance camp that Canada had, but then no one's really played a game since March or so, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think just overall playing rugby again is going to bring a sense of normality back to guys that are doing it. Like it's something we were doing for the last 10, 15 years. Everyone was doing that. So it's going to just kind of be a nice escape from everything that's going on. And then, yeah, just everyone at the end of the day, we're all here because we like playing rugby. So I know for me, the last game I played was in February, and that was one game. I really haven't played rugby in a year and a half. Other guys like Doug and Hearn and the rest of the DC boys, they all played up until March, and then it got canceled. So yeah, I think it definitely does bring an extra level of excitement this year.
So before we continue to look forward, we just want to take it a step back. And one of the questions we ask all our guests is, what got you started in rugby?
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good question, especially in Canada, because generally people have a different story, or maybe it's just the basic. I got started in high school, and mine's pretty standard. Like my brother and I always wanted to play football growing up, but our parents would never let us. And then my brother's 4 years older, and then randomly one day, his buddy is a Fijian guy at elementary school, and his uncle and dad started up a program. My dad signed the permission for him, so I was like, well, that means in 4 years I get to play. And so yeah, about grade 6 I played a little bit. Then it was really in grade 8 in the high school at Oak Bay where I kind of got rolling with rugby, and my dreams of being an NBA player subsided, and rugby kind of took over the main sport for me.
And it's funny you kind of talk about your roots in BC, and I think this is something that we've always kind of been curious because we're all Ontario boys. So I want to ask you this question: is what's so unique about BC rugby compared to the rest of the country?
I think there's a couple of factors. Like one of the obvious answers is we've got great weather, so we can play a lot of rugby year round. So that definitely helps out. And then I think it's just entrenched here. So I'm a James Bay guy, club wise, and we're the oldest club, I think, athletic club west of the Mississippi, I think is what was our claim to fame. And then a game we always play against the rowers in Vancouver is called the Cox Cup, and that's been going on since the 1880s or 1890s. There's just a lot of history back here with rugby, so I think that kind of it's entrenched in a few of the high schools and good local scenes that way. But yeah, it's just a multitude of factors, and those are probably the two main ones I would say.
Who's some of the teams or some of the players that you really enjoy watching? Anytime they hit the pitch, you're like, as I know earlier today, you were like, we have to do this interview in the morning because I got to watch the Calcutta Cup later today. So we know you're definitely into watching rugby. So who are some of the guys that or teams that get you excited?
Yeah, well, sorry, the boys are out there watching the France League and banging away right now, so it must be a good try going on. But yeah, I love rugby, man. I'm a rugby fanatic. I grew up kind of watching my brother play, and then he would wake up early morning 2003 World Cup before I was really into it, watch Johnny Wilkinson. Remember the first rugby video game was a demo, and it was Wallabies versus England. And my brother was a Wilkinson fan, so I would play as the Wallabies. So I kind of got into watching them, and then the Tri Nations, so the All Blacks, and my favorite player growing up was Kieran Reid. So every time I got to watch him play, it's pretty cool. You could try and oh, maybe I can try and do that. And then, oh, he does it way better. How does he do that? It was really cool. I didn't get to play against the All Blacks at the World Cup, but even just going in for a couple of beers in the change room afterwards and meeting some of those guys was really special. So yeah, those teams. And honestly, I watch so much rugby. It's stupid. When the BC Premiership's going on, oh, my buddy's playing. My two guys on both teams. Okay, I'll watch James Bay Castaways. It's how's their game doing? What are they doing? I'm like, oh yeah, he had a really good game. Like, I just like watching rugby, and I love watching people I know as well. So that's always fun to do.
I think I think it's also kind of interesting that, like, as part of your answer there, you kind of mentioned a little bit of like your early exposure to the sport was through like a video game,
Yeah,
which I think it's interesting because it was like during like that World Rugby election, that was kind of one of like Pichot's like talking points was that he wanted to try to get a big rugby video game kind of off the ground. Just because, do you think like something like that would have obviously had a bit of an impact on you and stuff? I think it did for me too. For me, it was Rugby '08 was kind of like
yeah,
I was introduced to rugby in high school too, and then like one of my buddies ended up with a copy of Rugby '08, so we'd go over to like his house and play Rugby '08 after us before any of us ever actually started watching any games. But it's so I was like, I don't know, like I'm just curious now, like what are your thoughts on just kind of like, do you think it's something that World Rugby kind of needs in order to kind of reach that younger audience?
yeah. Real quick, I'll tell you a funny story about Rugby 08 actually. So we also had it in my grad lounge at high school. We had it on a PlayStation 2, and we got our grad lounge privileges taken away from us for like 2 weeks because all of us were just skipping class and going and playing Rugby 08. So that was pretty
It's like
funny.
it's I don't know, video review or something for it's how you're
Yeah,
getting better at for the rugby team. It has some academic values. You're
yeah,
learning about like the nations of the world or something.
yeah, sure. Or just taking Jason Robinson running in circles and scoring tries. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, I think there's another rugby player that came out and said that's one of the biggest things that rugby needs. Is
Hugo, the
yeah,
yeah, Manone
yeah.
from England.
So I think it's a fair statement, right? Like especially I think especially today or like in today's world. So like I know my buddy Jake Hilnicki, he gave me a PlayStation in March when like everything shut down, and that's how like I've kept in touch. Like we play online, and that's like all the guys get your microphones on, and that's how you hang out now, right? So especially right now when everyone's kind of on the online world, you've got to expose kids as much as possible to rugby, and that might be a good avenue. And then everyone knows how big FIFA is, and in Canada, NHL and Madden and everything. So I think getting a good rugby game out there is only going to improve it, especially in countries where rugby isn't the main sport, but maybe it's like the third or fourth. You know, like countries like Australia where everyone thinks it's a huge one, but a big rugby game is going to go a long way to get those fringe fans back involved more, I think.
My full-time job is working in elementary schools, and I talk to a lot of kids, and like especially young boys, they love video games. They love FIFA. You know, we've got a big Syrian refugee population. They're obsessed with FIFA, and I'm just like, if I could just get a good rugby game into your guys' little hands, they'd be bit. They would
Yeah,
love it. But
absolutely.
unfortunately, Rugby 20 or what was the other one? Rugby Challenge 3 this year hasn't really hit that spot yet.
Okay.
Um, but Luke, we're going to kind of move on now. We're going to talk about your time with the Arrows, because really you're officially the first Arrow to sign a contract elsewhere in MLR. So you
That's
can
what I
hang that
was
little
told. Yeah.
prestige on your wall.
It'll be a fun
Um,
trivia question in 10 years.
yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
Now you joined the team near the end of the season. What was like to kind of join that locker room? Now it was kind of a team kind of in flux throughout the year with the ARC. So what was it like to kind
Yeah.
of join that locker room?
It was great to be honest. Good group of dudes there. Really good, like core team, and they made what was Dan Moore, who was my captain like for that whole season. After my first game, it was Austin, the midweek one, and he made me sing a song. So I sang my song, and then he gave a speech about, because I mean, in reality, they transformed from the Ontario Blues into the Toronto Arrows, and I've been playing the CRC since I was 19 for BC. So Dan Moore gave a funny speech talking about how a BC kid always dreams about playing for the Ontario Blues or the Toronto Arrows. But yeah, those guys are awesome. Like I have a lot of guys I still keep in touch with. I lived with the Donardos, and their family became like my second family. I call them my Ontario mom and dad. So it was super easy environment to come into. Just kind of got thrown into it. Like I said, I landed on a Wednesday. I didn't play the San Diego game, and I was right into it. It was awesome.
Yeah, I guess you kind of touched on it there. It's like, I know the stint, I guess, was kind of short. The 5 games toward the end of the season there. But what was sort of like your first impressions of Major League Rugby? And like, do you think like it kind of helped like set up a little bit of getting kind of guys ready for the World Cup that happened later that year as well?
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, I'm a rugby guy, so I was watching everything. But then we get into it, it was it was awesome. Like it was the type of rugby that MLR brings is just so different from anything else because you get different variants of guys who have played at certain levels, and so everyone's attack opinions or attack strategies are different, and their defensive levels are different variants. So every game is very different from in and out. Like our game against Glendale versus New York versus like when we went down to Seattle and played the semifinal, every game was very different. Uh, but it was a pretty good level, I thought, or it is a good level and is getting better. So I definitely think it prepared all of us for the World Cup in a good way. And I know that was a big factor for why I ended up hopping out there, was just to get ready for the World Cup.
And so, kind of at the World Cup, we'll start off with a little bit of, I guess, kind of a fun thing for it. You kind of made some headlines down in New Zealand with a quote that mentioned that the All Blacks are just a bunch of guys in shorts playing rugby. New Zealand, the All Blacks actually, I kind of found the page again. They had it like on their website for a while, like in the lead up to the game, just kind of the bold headline of just guys in shorts playing rugby. What was did you kind of expect that quote to kind of get that big of a reaction, or was that
No,
yeah?
no, I think that's a classic like media taking a script of one little quote and blowing up, and I didn't even think like that would be a big quote that would go anywhere.
Like
I
a
forget what,
clickbait headline.
yeah, exactly what it is. Because like the actual question was like going into this game against the two-time defending world champs. Hard to argue that they're not the best team of all time. How do you approach that? Being Canada, being a tier two nation where hockey dominates and basketball, baseball, and so I just said, well, like, yeah, we know they're the best team in the world. At the end of the day, we just got to go out there and tackle them. We've got to go out there and try and get past their tackles, pass the ball. They're just like us. It's like the old saying, everyone puts their pants on one leg at a time. That's pretty much what I was going for with that quote. And it blew up, and that's hilarious. And then actually it was really funny because Q was in that interview with me, and they used a quote from him and his picture in the headlines. Like, man, now they all think that I said that. And I didn't even end up playing, so it was even funnier. It's like, oh, whatever.
So, what was your experience of going over and playing in Japan for those World Cup games?
Yeah, so my playing experience was pretty limited. I got the time in Italy, and then didn't get to play against the two big dogs. Then our new game got canceled. So it's hard to comment too much on that. But the experience as a whole was pretty wicked. Like just being a part of a World Cup and being something that big, and the first only World Cup. So the buzz around that one was crazy. Like one of my favorite parts was just our training camp in Nagato when we first got there, and they had just like adopted us. There was Canadian flags everywhere. We'd go to schools and they were wearing Rugby Canada kit. And we'd go to trainings. There'd be 500 people watching our trainings. It was unreal to be just in that microcosm of like, everything's highlighted. It felt like you're actually a rock star. But that buzz was taken to every little bit. Like my family was in there as fans, and like people would come up and they'd be singing the national anthem with them before the game. They'd go into. I remember one time my fiance and my parents went into a bar to watch one of the Japanese games, and it's like all Japanese people, and who are they? They might have been playing Scotland. Like, like these people look like they might be cheering for Scotland. And then when they're like Japan scored, and my family like cheered, and everyone's like, yeah, like they cheered, and they all got so excited. So I think just the experience for me as a player in Japan and experience the World Cup was amazing. And from everyone I've talked to that was there as a fan, said it was so cool the way the country got around everyone, not just Japan, but who's the famous guy with the paint on jerseys? Haka.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
I'm blanking on what his name was though. They had he painted like every single. He went to at least one. I think it was like he went to at least one match involving every team at the time, and like did like the body paint of all the
But it was cool like, to see the true like power of sport really like, bringing one, a country together, and two, like countries together. So after the World Cup, I did a bit of traveling. I was in Tokyo, and I met up with a buddy of mine from high school who's a really good basketball player, and we got into rugby for the last couple of years. And he's like, I haven't thought of rugby since I graduated like 8 years ago. he goes, I've watched every single game of Japan's World Cup. I was like, that's wicked. So it was super cool to be a part of.
See, even that, like, I think is like, I know, like, there's the World Cup bidding process, I guess, opened up last week, and that's one of the things that everyone's kind of saying. I guess there's those rumors that people want to put together like a US Canada or joint bid for it.
Yeah.
And it's like, do you think, like, as your friend was saying, it's like he hasn't thought about it for a while, but living in a country where the World Cup was happening, he was like, I watched every single game. So is that, is like a Canada USA World Cup, like, is that something kind of like along the lines of the video game? Like, do you think that would be like how big of a boost do you think that could be to the sport in North America?
Oh, I think it'd be huge. You can't deny that having with the third biggest sporting event, even just anywhere in your backyard, it's going to be on TV. There's going to be signs. You're just going to get exposed to it, and people are going to get on board. Canadians, Americans love sports, right? So it doesn't matter what it is. If we're hosting something, it's going to be well attended. It's going to be well supported. There's obviously crazy logistical. Like, we got a massive. It's not like having it in Japan where you can just take a bullet train for a couple hours. You got to take a plane 6 hours across the country, whatever it is, right? So, but the idea of hosting one, I think, would be huge for rugby in North America over the next, whether it be 8 years or 12 years, and wherever that may be. I think doing a joint one with Canada, getting a couple hosting cities in there would be big for us.
World Rugby's had success in North America hosting large rugby events. The thing about all those games at Soldier Field and stuff like that. So it's definitely something that's attainable. It's just they got to get all their ducks in a row, especially with the state of USA Rugby.
And we know that World Rugby wants to tap the US market, right? It's the biggest sport market in the world. So they're trying, and I think when the time's right, it'll happen.
For sure. Now let's talk about that sleeping giant, that market, and we're going to talk about your future, especially with Old Glory DC. And you took a year off from MLR and played some games with James Bay. But what motivated you to join the fray again and go down to DC?
So it was always my plan to keep playing rugby. Just the way it worked out, I kind of had that lull. But then I was talking to a few different teams, and the head coach at DC got a hold of me through Doug and Kieran, and I've been talking to them through the whole year. Really like they spoke so highly of what's going on down here. I really like talking with Andrew, and just the way it worked out. I mean, you don't have a free pick of anywhere you want to go, but this was the one that worked out the best for me, and was not where I thought I would be playing rugby, to be honest. I thought I would be in Toronto or in Seattle, like somewhere closer to home. I had no idea what to expect. Like, DC was such a foreign idea to me, but so far my time here has been awesome. They do have a great setup. They've got a great group of guys. They've got a ton of support from, local people and the fans from last year. So hopefully that continues on. But yeah, it's a new adventure for me, and one that I'm very excited about.
So Ben Foden went on a Rugby Pass podcast and kind of talked about his first experiences with Rooney and kind of the experiences of their first training camps and how they had to take like multiple buses to their island training camp and stuff like that. So my question to you is, what has the logistics been like working with Old Glory DC? Like, from and the big question is, we really haven't asked anybody, any Canadians, about what the process is like from signing your contract to getting the visas and stuff like that. So how has that whole process been like, working with an American MLR team?
Yeah, so on the first question there about the logistics, that's one of the reasons DC appealed so much to me, is because I knew they had a good setup. And so, for example, a bunch of us all live in the same apartment complex. We got like 8 3-bedroom apartments, and that is 10 minutes from our training center. Our training center has the field, weights, everything, like offices, everything's right there. And then our field is a bit farther away, but that's, once a week kind of thing. So we're all so centered. And I've talked to guys like on New York after we played them, or when I played against Toronto, and they're telling me those horror stories of like 3 hours of training, guys getting off work and can't making it, and this, and there's an accident, so they can't get across a bridge or whatever. So our setup here is unreal. Like, super happy to have that. And then on the second question about the visa and the process, it's pretty painless, to be honest. Well, it depends on, I think, on your, I guess, rugby resume. So for me, I signed my contract, and then I just sent like essentially a list of what I had done in rugby to DC. They've got a lawyer, does everything. It took forever this time, but that was more so like just paperwork and like pandemic stuff. But there was
Right.
never a panic that I wasn't going to get it, because like with a sport visa, I guess like once you've hit you just gotta check some boxes. Some other guys have had some problems, I know, because in the States, one of the things I want to see is why should we allow you to play apart from American? And so like if you played overseas or you played for the national team, that's pretty checks the box. Other guys are able to get ones, like a lot of the pride guys are starting to get contracts. And it just takes like, I don't know the exact process, so I can't come on it too much, but it might be a bit more of a process. But it's becoming more common to see guys, younger guys, get in and be able to get a contract now.
It was interesting because obviously my experience of rugby has come from like the European background, being born and raised in England. So when Ben Foden was warned that, it's not going to be like Northampton Saints, I was like, yeah absolutely not. It's definitely not going to be like that.
And it's like, I feel for Rudy because, and he mentions it, like, you can't just build a training field. You can, like, or you can't just like to try and build anything in New York is going to cost so much money. So like, I definitely feel for the team, because that's definitely not a tough. They definitely have a tough hill ahead, and they've obviously adapted, and they're still getting high profile players. But like, yeah, watching that video, it's just it's like poor. No, I'm not gonna say poor Ben, but it definitely is a harrowing experience for anyone that is coming to America for the first time and having to deal with the New York setup.
Yeah, I think it's a huge problem for all the big markets, right? Like even Toronto, when I was there, we were training out in is it Peterborough or Whitby, like out at one of the big domes way on like the northeast side.
Yeah.
But then we, sometimes we'd be at York, and they've got it consolidated now at UT, which is like awesome. It's right on one of the main metro lines. So that's like that was kind of growing pains for Toronto. But other places have the same issues. It's like in Seattle, like I can't imagine what LA is going to be like this year, or what they ever are in LA.
Yeah, no, that's.
But all the ones have that, and that's why we're so lucky in DC, because it's a pretty sprawling. I don't know, we're just lucky. But yeah, New York's like, it's a little tiny island. What are you going to do?
Old Glory, obviously, you're going to be part of the back row. They have a pretty solid back row setup, back row contingent there with Calum Gibson, Mungo Mason, draft pick Matthew Gordon, Nick Mirisham, and Jameson Fanana Schultz, who has some Eagles caps under the belt. How do you see yourself kind of factoring into that squad this year?
Can you be a bit more specific?
Oh, I was just like, well, I guess like, what are your kind of like your expectations for yourself kind of this season,
Right.
when you take a look at the squad, and like, like just kind of where do you feel like your style of play can fit in to help Old Glory DC this year?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Like I was brought in to do a job, like, and the coach he's not just picking names out of a hat. He's like, we want you to come in and do this. So he's got a role that he wants me to play. And it's kind of like rugby I've always played, and that's to be, get up and run and work and be a big body around the field and get some of the, not necessarily dirty work, but get over the gain line, they got the ball, hit them. So I'll be playing, that kind of role down here. And I think the balance of our back row is pretty awesome, and we've got bodies to rotate in and out. So you should see a bunch of fresh guys running around and doing what you want to see a back row do, which is be everywhere and be impactful in the game.
Now, that list that Derek kind of rhymed off, do you feel that the logistics of a season in COVID-19, do you think that there will be a lot of rotation and different kind of setups throughout the year?
Hard to say, man. I have no idea. Like, I don't know Andrew well enough to know what his ideas are on that. And COVID's a curveball for everyone, so we have no idea what that's going to be like. I know like the protocols we got in place right now should help mitigate some of that stuff, and hopefully we aren't like, the NFL where guys are sitting out for 2 or 3 weeks, and hopefully with everything going on and more vaccines getting out there, and hopefully we can get ahead of it as opposed to behind it. So yeah, it's going to be a wild ride this season, that's for sure.
Now, also on the team are friend of the podcast, Doug Fraser, and other Canadian international, Kieran Hearn. Have you been in contact with those guys directly? Have they given you any hints of like, oh, once you're over here and pass through quarantine, these are the places to hit up in DC or anything along those lines?
So I'm actually in DC right now, and they're on the couch in my living room. They're my roommates. So,
there you go. Question answered.
So yes.
Yes. Yeah. So they've been great. They're one of the reasons I'm down here. Like I said, they were speaking so highly of DC, and like her and I flew down here together. Dougie's been down here for a long time. Her and I got here about 2-3 weeks ago. So we've done we've lay low quarantine, and then we've been training for the last little bit. But yeah, they lived like right in DC last year. We're just on the other side of the river, so a bit farther away, but also with COVID, not a lot going on. But yeah, like I love the idea of being in DC. I love museums and history and that stuff. I'm a bit of a nerd that way. So once it all cools down, I'm super excited to go explore. I've got a friend of mine, a couple that I met through some friends that are actually from DC. So like, yeah, we'll take you to see all the spots when it's an option. So
awesome. Yeah. Derek, you asked me why I was wearing this London Irish sweater, and it's because of Kieran. I just put the two and two together. That's exactly why I'm wearing it.
There you go.
That's nothing the reason that I just want to show it off. So the reloaded schedule, as some of the teams have kind of branded it, has just been released. Are there any games that you have circled in your calendar already that you're like, oh, okay, we play the Arrows then, or we play Seattle then? Like, are there any of those games that you're like, I am fired up to play this year?
So the easy answer is the first one, I think, which is New Orleans, I believe. So I'm just like excited to play again. Like it'll be been 13 months about since I'd played rugby. So that'll be super exciting. Obviously Toronto will be fun to go up and play against the old team, a bunch of friends. We were originally supposed to play in Seattle in June, and Dougie and Hearn and I were all super excited. And there's a bunch of Canadian boys there. So we're hoping maybe at that point that friends and family will be able to come down. Now we play Seattle here, so won't have that luxury. But yeah, I think those are the answers for me would be the first one, obviously Toronto, and yeah.
Just to kind of end off here, you mentioned that you can kind of hear in the background Doug and Kieran watching the Six Nations. Yeah. We know you're excited for the Calcutta Cup matchup later today. Do you have any bold predictions for how the tournament's going to play out? Is there any players that you're kind of looking forward to make a big impact? And ultimately, I guess, who do you think is going to take it this year?
And then to preface this, last podcast we recorded, Derek, we said some hot takes for the Six Nations, and Derek said that Italy was going to get the Grand Slam. So
that's a joke. You guys can't take jokes.
No, that is 100% serious.
Yeah, so you can see how at the World Cup things get taken out of context.
Yeah, I completely understand what you're saying, Luke. Yeah, it's unfair what happened to you. It's unfair what's happening to Dan now, and then he's gonna bring it up in a year too, just like I just brought up your quote from like over a year ago. So it's gonna be
we're the media now, Derek.
I know. We suck just like the rest of it.
Let's see. So who do I want to watch play? I love watching like Finn Russell play. I think he's just so much fun.
Watching videos of him juggle just absolutely blow my mind.
The tennis rackets and the tennis balls?
Yeah, because you're already super talented. Why do you need to be talented in another thing?
So I love watching those guys. And then, man, I think France will take it. I think they're unreal right now. Even with Ntamak out, like their other 10, Jubilee, just with a J. He's awesome.
Jubilee.
DuPont. I think they're the team to beat. It's going to be, but again, like with everything going on with COVID, it's going to be a bit of a leveling field, I think. But I still think they're the cream of the crop, and we'll take it. So yeah.
Well, Luke, we really appreciate you taking the time out of this, and we'll let you join the other guys to see if Derek's prediction was wrong or not. But if anyone wants to listen to our episodes previously, we've had his roommates, Doug Fraser, on the show. We've had his former yacht captain, Jeff Hassler, on pretty recently. So if you want to listen to any of these previous episodes, go to LaRouche Rugby on YouTube or on any of the podcast platforms. And if you want to reach out to us, we're on all the social medias, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And then leave us a review on any of the platforms. Let us know what you want to see, who you want us to interview next. And Luke, thanks again for coming on, man. We really appreciate this, and we love getting another perspective. We can get all of the guys with all the different perspectives on the show. It just makes the experience of learning more about Canadian rugby even better.
Thanks for having me, fellas.